What's up, Fathom Church, and welcome to the Going Deeper podcast. This is your host, Kyle Knight, and these are just episodes that we like to have to hopefully help you go deeper in your relationship with God. I'm in our podcast studio only with lead pastor Chris Martin today. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Kyle.
Hi. Karina Boss is out on vacation, so it's just us. And this is our last podcast in the, not last, should just said last podcast and stop there. Last podcast in this space.
I mean, Lord willing.
Lord willing.
I mean, let's follow James and just say, if the Lord wills it, this is our last podcast in this room.
We'll see. Yeah, we're sitting in Pastor Chris's old office with just some couches now, as we have just moved into our new space. And so we'll have, Lord willing, a different podcast studio office.
It's going to be a studio.
It's going to be a studio. But yeah, so this episode, me and Chris just wanted to jump on. And as we have just wrapped up 2 Samuel as our teaching series this spring, we wanted to kind of go back and just do a little recap episode of both 1 and 2 Samuel, because it has been a very long time that we have been going through both of these Old Testament books here at Fathom. And so we just wanted to take an episode to kind of go back and look at certain kind of themes, different takeaways that we've had and that we've heard about people in our church have had. So hopefully this helps you, church, just kind of remember, look back. Maybe you have just recently started attending Fathom, and so you've been here for maybe 2 Samuel or part of that, and or you've been here the whole time and you forgot that many years ago we were in 1 Samuel. And so hopefully some of this will kind of jog your memory a little bit if you've been with us for a long time. But let me just throw out some. I did my research on.
You did some research.
I did some research. I've got some numbers here. These are just fun things. So we started 1 Samuel chapter 1 on January 10th, 2021.
Right after the pandemic.
Right after the pandemic.
Or maybe the pandemic's still going.
I think, yeah, I guess at that point.
When did it end? I don't even know when it ended.
I don't know. But 1 Samuel started back in January of 2021. And again, we've just been doing this in the spring. We started 2 Samuel chapter 1 on January 28th, 2024. So
last
January, it was a little bit shorter period of time in 2 Samuel. And we just finished this about a week or so ago on April 6th, 2025. But that's 5 springs in 2 books. That's 61 sermons. That's a lot. 38 in 1 Samuel, 23 in 2 Samuel. You want to guess how many minutes that is?
Did you do all the math?
I did all
you
the math.
You counted up all the math.
I did. It's easy when it's like Spotify and stuff.
Oh, does it do that for you?
I got a calculator.
All right, let me think this for a second.
Now this is rough. I didn't count seconds. Sorry, I just rounded.
Okay, let me make a guess here. Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna guess.
Now nobody go back.
Are we talking
minutes? Minutes. Nobody go back and actually do the minutes to the second and say that I'm wrong, because I'm probably about.
I'm going to say
10 or 20 minutes off.
So my guess is, and I just did this math on my calculator because I'm going to guess I averaged 47 minutes. And so I'm going to say it's 2,800 minutes.
Wow. 2,744 minutes. Now, I rounded some. It's probably closer to, it could be closer to
because I know about how long I go.
Way to go. Now, that wasn't all you. There were a few others mixed in there, but well done. That is a great guess. Yeah. 2,700, 2,800 minutes of sermon. So if you've been here with us through 5 springs, you've listened to Chris or an elder or whatever guest preacher for almost 2,800.
Yeah, that's minutes. By the way, that's almost 48 hours. So you could listen to the whole series.
There you go.
In 2 straight days if you went
that's
hard.
That's not bad.
Stay up for 48 hours.
If you went hard.
And just listen. Can you imagine?
No, I can't.
48 hours
Cannot imagine.
Of Fathom sermons.
But hey, if you just started attending here and you want to do it,
I mean, that's dedication.
They're all on there. You can
That's
like
go worse than watching all 3 Lord of the Rings extended editions.
That's very
way
true.
less entertaining.
You'd be sick of Chris's voice after a couple of days.
You'd be sick way before 48 hours.
Now I put down some sermon titles just to refresh some memories. Okay. We had some sermon titles such as Anxiety, Depression, and Peace. That was the very first one in 1 Samuel.
Oh,
you know that?
Hannah, the Song of Hannah. She's pretty.
Yeah,
I remember that.
The Return of the Ark. Lost Donkeys.
Yeah, good old.
Hopefully this is
Kish's
jogging some memory. Conviction or Condemnation. That's a good one. Burn the Ships.
That was the beginning of 2 Samuel.
Remember that? Burn the Ships. That was a good one. Biblical Violence. Oh, that was a great title for that one. God of Wrath. The F Word.
Yeah, I got in trouble for that one.
The F Word, Forgiveness, which was, and my personal favorite, How to Have an Affair.
Yeah, that's the David. That was the David and Bathsheba sermon.
Yeah, How to Have an Affair. So that is just some fun little metrics ish about 1st and 2nd Samuel. But hey, Five Springs Church, if you've been with us for the last 5 years or so, hopefully you've been blessed by this sermon series, these last couple books, and maybe you've gotten a lot out of it. Maybe you haven't, but we're going to kind of talk about that. Chris, let me ask you just first question. Like, how are you feeling being done preaching through 2 Old Testament narrative books like 1st and 2nd Samuel?
Yeah. I mean, it feels good to be able to say, oh, look at that. I mean, we can look at that corpus of work and say that's pretty cool. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a long time. Some guys don't do what we do. Actually, a lot of guys don't do what we do. Like if they were going to preach 1st and 2nd Samuel, they would either take the greatest hits of 1st and 2nd Samuel, or they would take much larger swaths of text, maybe cover 4, 5, 6 chapters at a time, break it up like that, as opposed to dialing into some of the minutia that we did. Or they will take it in one swoop. So it's 60 weeks in a row or something like that. Whereas we just said, hey, we'll do, 15 to 20 each spring and really take it. I mean, it was 5 years, but it was helpful, I think, to balance it out so that nobody got bored with it. Nobody got overwhelmed by it. It wasn't like, hey, we were in this for an entire calendar year and nothing else. So that feels good. If I'm honest, I actually, when I was writing the last sermon, I was getting a little bummed, which is weird because, I don't know why I would be bummed, but I thought these are, I don't know how long the Lord has me at Fathom. I mean, maybe I'll be here for the rest of my career. I don't know, but I could not think of a case in which in the next 30 years, 20 to 30 years, I will ever preach through these 2 books again like that.
Right.
Like we might revisit portions of it and portions of David's life because he's such a big deal. But I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to preach the second half of 2 Samuel again.
You said that to me the other day in the office, and you're like, I don't think I'm going to. And I very quickly was like, no, you totally will. But I mean, you're right. You might not.
Like 5 more years.
Right.
Like, where are we going to have? I mean,
there's a lot of other books to preach.
I probably have 25 years of ministry, vocational ministry left, maybe 30 at max. I'm not sure I'm going to take another, 6th of that, 5th of that, and do these books again. So yeah, it was kind of it was like a weird mixed emotion of like, now, I feel really accomplished that we've done it. And I'm also like, I might never get to do that again.
There's always 1st and 2nd Kings that we could jump into.
Baby.
That's
there's other things to preach, but I was kind of like, oh, we're done with David. Like we've done David. Yep. That's pretty much David.
Yeah.
So
just like, I think just maybe a quick recap ish of these 2. I mean, we went through, and we'll talk about some themes and everything, but started off with talking about Samuel, right? Samuel, and Israel demanding a king, and the Lord providing Saul. And so the anointing of Saul, but then God rejects Saul as king. I'm going over this really fast. God rejects Saul as king. David is there. David's anointed. And then you got the whole David running, being a fugitive pretty much from Saul. That was like 1 Samuel.
Yeah. So literally 1 Samuel is 3 years. Okay.
Yep.
Year 1 was really focused on Samuel, the prophet Samuel, all the way up until Israel demands a king. Then the second year, that first king is Saul. And we started with the donkey story and all that. And really Saul, the whole year we were talking about Saul, and we kind of end with Saul being rejected by Samuel, by God, because of Saul's sin.
Yeah.
So that's like the second, piece of that. And then the third piece, year 3 of 1 Samuel, is we are introduced to David. He's anointed. Then you get the David and Goliath story. Then you get the David playing his harp for Saul's story. Then we get David coming into Saul's house and marrying Saul's daughter, and then Saul trying to kill him and murder him multiple times, and then the Saul and Jonathan thing. And so literally year 3, the remainder of 1 Samuel is the conflict between Saul and David. David has been anointed king, but he has not been inaugurated as king. Saul is still the inaugurated king. He is still the anointed one of Israel, but the kingdom has been ripped away from him. And it is evident that his downfall and his spiral is out of control. And remember, it ends with this weird encounter where Saul like raises Samuel from the dead in some ways from a medium, a witch, the witch of Endor. And she calls back to life Samuel.
Which sounds like some Star Wars
thing. And the ghost of
like,
Samuel speaks to Saul. I mean, it's a wild thing.
Yeah.
So 1 Samuel was nuts. And then we moved into 2 Samuel.
Yeah. So maybe just thinking of 1 Samuel, what were some of your, maybe you personally, but like your biggest themes or takeaways from 1 Samuel, or that we heard from D groups, from discussions, from people that like, what were some big takeaways from 1 Samuel, whether it was with Samuel, with Saul, with that relationship with David, but what are some of the big ones in 1 Samuel?
I mean, gosh, there's so many. Okay. So like thinking 5 years ago, all the way back to Samuel, I mean, Samuel is coming off he's the first prophet of God. He's the first prophet of Yahweh to show up. I mean, I can't remember since maybe, I don't know if there was a prophet before Moses, after Moses, but either way, Israel is in the period of the judges. And so Israel is a complete mess. I mean, it is an utter catastrophe.
We're also we're kind of in the midst of this with our Bible reading plan, if you're keeping up with it. And it is really cool to go back and be like,
I mean, Judges ends horrifically.
Yeah.
I mean, it ends absolutely, like, it's insane how Judges ends. And so Samuel, I think I'm going to quote it close to correct. In 1 Samuel 1 or 2, probably 2, Samuel is a young boy and he's working in the temple with Eli, the tabernacle. The temple hadn't been built, but he's working with Eli under his tutelage. And it said the word of the Lord was rare in those days.
Yeah.
And so like God's kind of removed his hand of favor from Israel.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden God shows up and starts speaking to Samuel. So we talked a lot about how to hear from the Lord. We talked a lot about what the Lord was looking for in terms of his servants. So if you remember, Eli has 2 sons who are complete dumpsters, Phinehas and Hophni. Those guys are total pieces of work.
Yep.
And Samuel is a young man full of, at least appears to be, high integrity and a passion, a love for the Lord. So you're beginning to see his character traits that the Lord's looking for. Then you fast forward, essentially Israel rejects Samuel as judge over them, and they demand a king. Remember that verse in the middle, or maybe the third of the way through 1 Samuel, where it says, but Israel rejected Samuel and they demanded a king that they might be like all the other nations. And so Israel, her elders, reject God as king.
Yeah.
and they want a human king. And Samuel gives a big warning about that.
Mhm.
He's like, hey, the king's going to take your kids. He's going to take your land. It's going to, use them for his wars. They're going to
Mhm.
die. And they're like, bring them on. We want kings. And so they pick Saul.
God was like, okay,
They pick Saul. Yeah.
give him a king.
Saul is the king that,
Mhm.
that Israel gets when they demand it. And Saul, he started off pretty well. He
looked the part.
He looked the part. He fit.
Yep.
But real quickly you saw major character flaws. So character was a really big piece of this. And then into once the kingdom is kind of stripped away from Saul, we meet David, and David is kind of the forgotten, runty shepherd boy. Remember this? He's ruddy and handsome, but he's small. He's undersized. He's youngest. But what we see in David is, obviously the Bible calls him a man after God's own heart. What we see in him is a real love for the Lord, is a real willingness to own mistakes, is a real intentional heart of repentance. And we see this all through his life. Even in his worst moments, he is quick to repent. He is quick to acknowledge failure and seek to be restored under the Lord. So it would seem that David is like the counter to Saul, and character seems to be a big piece. Obedience to God seems to be a big piece through this. But then as we march further and further into David's life, we begin to start to see inklings of a promise from God to David for a potential solution to all that ails Israel. And so the real big theme really doesn't show up until I think it's 2 Samuel chapter 8 or 9, when we get the Davidic covenant, the promise of a house and a king and a lineage and a legacy and a dynasty. The Davidic line will continue on, and it will not be broken. And from that will come the King of Kings. So, all of those things kind of play in together, but man, so many huge themes and so many little themes. Really it was week to week. Sometimes we were talking about, what do we do with spiritual warfare? What about the, the doctrine of hell? What do we do with the, witches and mediums and the occult? And there are all kinds of stuff, man, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. I just remember from conversations I had from our D group in 1 Samuel, disobedience was a huge one.
Yep.
Following the life of Saul. And a lot of it was, I remember just that like partial obedience is disobedience, and how many times Saul almost got it right. But just didn't follow through all the way. And there were consequences to that. And so that disobedience piece, I think was a big theme that I continued to hear from 1 Samuel. What about 2 Samuel? Some of the stuff, we just kind of finished that, but all of David's life, his reign, but also his sin and consequences to that, and all the way through kind of, as we talked about the last few weeks, God's wrath and judgment for still Saul and Saul's bloodline through that. But then also, David, the last few weeks, David's credits, his end credits. And then the big one, I feel like at the end, the last one is sin and why. Yep. Like, why is that sin? So what did you think about 2 Samuel and some of your thoughts with that book?
Yeah.
A little bit more fresh.
Well, so really the second book begins with Saul's death. It begins with David being inaugurated as king in Judah, and then eventually in all of Israel. Remember at the beginning of the book, David is with the Philistines. He's actually living in Philistine territory. Saul then is killed, and then he leaves the Philistine territory. And that's where the burn the ships sermon came into play. It was like leaving the old behind and burning every single opportunity you have to go back there. I've had a number of people mention that sermon over the past
very applicable
couple years.
In that one. And
but I think a lot of the conversations we had in 2 Samuel were around. So what we see with David is his rise and his fall. And his rise is this real, like he is a man of character. He is a military force. He is faithful to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
He's a passionate worshiper. Like he has all of these things going for him. So we see his ascent, but then we see his flaws, specifically in chapter 11, when David and Bathsheba, that whole incident. And I feel like for the rest of really after chapter 11 and 12, once he's called out by the prophet Nathan, what we talked about a lot were ongoing consequences for sin. We talked about ramifications for sin, even to the next generation, how that plays out then into our families, how it affects, like the ripple effects of sin. And that even when you are repentant, God is faithful to forgive you, but not faithful to remove every single consequence, especially, I think it's especially in really heinous sin. So we talked a lot about that. I feel like we talked a lot about that. But parallel to that is we also talked about the character of and nature of God a lot, because there's all these wars and there's all this violence and there's all these atrocities. And then there's also these confusing moments where it seems like God is the one who's actively commanding some of these things. So we talked a lot about justice. We talked a lot about mercy. We talked a lot about the nature of sin, the nature of salvation, the nature of repentance. Like all of those things, I feel like have been major themes in 2 Samuel. All the while, and I said this in the last sermon, but it's very evident that David is not the king that we're looking for. Like we thought maybe, let's say and we'll embody Israel for a second. If we just had a king like all the other nations, then things would be okay. And then we got Saul, and Saul turned out to be a real piece of work. And so it's like, well, then maybe Saul was the wrong king. What we really need is a godly, faithful king. Enter David. Oh, now we've got the king. That's the king who we're looking for. But David lets us down. Even though for all of his good traits, he lets us down multiple times. And I think when you come to the end of the book, you realize David's not the king we were looking for either. Even though he is the king par excellence in the nation, he's still not the king that we're looking for. And I said, this is a Puritan quote, I think. So the Puritans used to say that God draws straight lines with crooked sticks. And I used that to talk about David at the last sermon, that what God is showing us in 1st and 2nd Samuel is the king is a crooked stick that the Lord uses to draw straight lines, and ultimately pointing to a king who would be the king that we are looking for. So I ultimately said that the whole thing, I think, is about Jesus. It's about getting us to the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Messiah who sits on the throne of David, which, then brings us straight to the gospel. So it felt like it really worked thinking through that whole trajectory.
Yeah. Okay. So what, as our lead pastor, what are you hoping that our church maybe can glean from this, can keep from this, 1st and 2nd Samuel for the last 5 years? What are the kind of big things that you're hoping, and maybe even seeing from some of the conversation? And I know we have these discussions with people almost every week through these sermons of things that they're wrestling with, things that they're being convicted of and everything. And it's doing work with all of us too, and staff as well. But what are some of your hopes that our church can kind of take from a sermon series like that as we move into, summer, what's next, fall, and then obviously a new book in the spring? Some things that we can really hopefully take away from that and remember from these ones.
Yeah, I mean, so at a high level, I just want people to become more biblically literate. So, like, that's a big piece. I'm just thankful that if you were with us for those 5 years, there's a big chunk of your Bible that you know way better than you did beforehand. And you probably knew 50, 60% of that. But there's probably a good 30, 40, 50% that was just like, I don't even.
There was some weird
there's
stories
some weird
in
stuff,
there, man.
Even
Weird
for people who do Bible reading plans and all that and been to seminary, it's like, oh, this was really good. So I hope that that's kind of a big piece for people. Second, I think I said this in, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when we first met David in the series. I don't know that you can rightly understand Christ without rightly understanding David. Mm-hmm. So David is really a character that we look at and we see so many good things and so many problematic things, but so many are foreshadowings of who our good shepherd will be. Yep. And so, when you read the Psalms, you're reading David's words. When you're reading, it's 1st, 2nd Samuel, but it's also 1st, 2nd Kings and 1st, 2nd Chronicles that we really see and experience, if not directly David's story, the after effects through his lineage. And then you read the New Testament. It opens on Mary and Joseph going to the city and town of Bethlehem, the city of David. Mm-hmm. And because they're relatives, they're in that line. And then they have a baby boy named Jesus who is from the tribe of Judah and the family of David. So you just keep seeing all of these things where it's like David is a key to unlock and understand the rest of the story. So when we first started the church, our first Old Testament book was Genesis that we started in. And we did 4 or 5 years in Genesis. Because I think Genesis unlocks the whole rest of the Bible. But I think David, to a lesser extent, but still a huge extent, is a key that unlocks a whole lot more of the Bible for us. So I hope that's a piece as well that people will kind of cling to, is that, okay, I can make sense of some things that maybe I wasn't making as much sense of before. And then I do think there are lessons to be learned, individual lessons. But I think the most important lesson isn't David, but it's about God. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm going to say the most important things that we pull from this, aside from like learning the scriptures, understanding how God's redemptive plan through history is working, I think the character and nature of who our God is the most important stuff. Yeah, David's a sinner. Yeah, Jonathan's a great guy. Yeah, Saul's a total heap of trash. Like you can learn all those things from those guys, but what's more important is learning about the God that they serve. So what's he like? What is he about? How, the mercy and justice sermons that we talked about, the wrath of God, the mercy of God, the character and nature of this God, what he demands. Remember, we just read this in the 1 year reading plan, so it's fresh in my mind. But remember Uzzah and the ark, and touches the ark, and he gets killed in the instant. Yeah. That's what kind of God does that? Right. Well, that's what you have to study. That's what you have to wrestle with in the text, is what kind of God is this? Yeah. And you find beautiful doctrine wrapped up in this narrative. So I that's what I would hope people. Yeah. I hope people walk away with a bigger view of the scriptures, a better understanding of the scriptures, and a much deeper and more robust version of who God is in their theology.
Yeah, and I appreciate that in how we do expository preaching, and we preach through these books verse by verse, chapter by chapter. Those questions that even Christians for a long time sometimes tend to have, of especially Old Testament, of like, well, how could God have done that? Like, why did God do that? Going through these and really taking time, 5 years, to like really taking the time and not glossing over these things to really study. Yeah, why did God do that? Like learning about the character of God. I found that highly valuable and just really important, because like you said earlier in this, is like not a lot of churches do this. Not a lot of churches spend this much time in some of these books. And I appreciate that that's how we do it, and that's how you do it here. It gives us that more complete look of God and his workings throughout all of time and throughout all of the scriptures. Yeah. Do you have anything else to add to this as we just wrapped up?
I'll throw one last thought in, and that's I'm sure there's a number of you who are newer in the last year or two, and that's great. And we're so glad that you're here. For those of you who've been around 3, 4, 5 years and feel like you were really able to like harness and get a handle on a book like this, I think that's all the more compelling reason for long-term commitment to a local church.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that it'd be foolish of me to say that everybody's going to just kind of stick around at Fathom for all the rest of their lives. But I do think whether you stay here or you go to a different church, the longer that you can stay at a place, especially a Bible preaching, theologically robust, shepherding focused church, the longer you're able to do that, the more you're going to get out of it. Because I think if we could get the people in a room who have been here for 5 years faithfully sitting in this, we would all say, myself included, man, the Lord has done some really important and good work in us. And that's, half a decade is a rarity for people to stay in one place for that long. My commitment to this church is longevity. And I would hope that as more and more people come, we would say, yeah, we're going to commit to longevity as well, because there's just better fruit at the end of the day from that.
Yeah.
So that's my final thought on it.
That's good. That's good. And yeah. And you know, as long as this was, and I agree with what you just said, Pastor Chris, hey, we're jumping into summer pretty soon, and we're going to be wrapping up Matthew's gospel. And then in the fall, we're jumping into a new one.
We got 3 new books. So this is a year of finishing stuff, because this fall, we're going to start a new 3-year series in a New Testament book. Next spring, we're going to start a new multi-year series in an Old Testament book. And next summer, so summer of 26, we're going to start a brand new multi-year series in a fresh gospel. So we're about to start fresh 3 series, which is exciting. It's exciting to, as much as I'm bummed that we're done.
As much as bummed finishing things.
Yeah. It's like,
we're starting new ones.
You know, it's like when you finish middle school and you're like, that was all right. High school, you know, like, okay, you finish high school. Okay. College, you know, and we're turning that page. It was great while it lasted. Thanks, David, for a good time. But we're ready to see what the Lord has for us next.
It's good. Cool. Well, thanks, Pastor Chris.
You bet, man.
Appreciate your time in this and the energy and that you put in this. Hey, church, 61 sermons, you can almost
48 hours,
2,800 minutes. Go for it and have fun. Thank you, church, for listening. We'll catch you next time.